It's really been exciting to share with you during these sessions as we have tried to view the biblical principles of ministry. I hope that God has gotten a hold of our hearts and has done something that's been way beyond anything we've said, and has literally brought us into an intimacy with Himself and an understanding of biblical ministry that will literally shape and change the way we allow Him to flow through us. This is so key in our day. We have so much pressure on us today. So much pressure in the church, so much pressure to perform. We are in such a doing mode. All God is wanting to pull us out and bring us back to Himself, that He might do something dynamic in our day that would bring revival that would only be explained in terms of the movement of the Holy Spirit. We have been viewing in these last sessions this phenomenal prayer that these disciples made as they were trying to attempt to find the will of God in relationship to filling the place of Judas, the apostleship. The prayer is very significant because it's just jammed full of theological content, and it gives us these overwhelming principles, this great perspective of how they viewed ministry and what they thought about the whole thing and how they approached it. And we've been trying to get into that and have that as our thought process as well. The prayer, of course, is given to us in Acts chapter 1, verse 24 and 25. It says, "And they prayed and said, You, O Lord, who know the hearts of all, show which of these two you have chosen to take part in this ministry and apostleship, from which Judas by transgression fell, that he might go to his own place." What's been so intriguing to us in all of this is that they literally relate the apostleship, ministry and apostleship, in terms of the sin of Judas. They see it in light of that. They set up a contrast about it. They give it as an illustration, if you please. It almost becomes a parable. You realize, of course, that the ministry and apostleship is not a position. They were not trying to give us some kind of a structure by which we should set up the structure, the officers of the church, the denomination that we are a part of. That's not what they were trying to do. They were giving us a illustration of a spiritual dynamic that God was wanting and attempting to do in and through them, as well as in and through us, as you look at the Scripture. This especially comes through when you see the Greek words, because the Greek words, the Greek language actually paints a picture for us. It's a picturesque language, and it's dynamic in its picture. This word going beyond, this word transgression, that Judas by transgression fell, again paints this picture. It paints the picture of going beyond. Here's the boundary, here's the fence, and Judas would not stay within the boundary. The boundary of the presence, the boundary of the call, the boundary of the ministry and apostleship that God had made him for. All that God had provided was not good enough for Judas. All that God had already given Judas just wasn't adequate. All that God had laid out for Judas, Judas just wouldn't accept it. He was determined to go beyond. What a powerful message that is. See, God has already given you freedom, already given you victory, already given you forgiveness. He's already given you resource. He's already given you power, already given you strength, already given you wisdom, already given you happiness, already given your life, already given you. Hey, will you live within the resource that He's given you? Why do you keep going outside of the resource of God? Why would you for one single second depend upon yourself? Why for one split moment would you say, I'm going to go to my own place and do my own thing? Why for one single hour would you want that when you know it's chaos and it's failure and it never produces anything but emptiness? Why would you choose to be a Looney Tune? Why would you choose to be a cartoon caricature of the real thing God made you to be as you operate on your own, build your own thing, do your own action, and you become that Looney Tune when God has all the resource of His dynamic being filling you, using you, spilling through you if you just live within the boundaries of His resource. Never ever go beyond yourself. Never ever go beyond His resource. Never live out of yourself. Would you die to yourself? Would you die to all you can produce? Would you only minister in the resource that God has? Would you literally live within the boundaries of the dynamic fullness of the Spirit so that nothing ever spills out of you but the life of His being? Would you live like that in ministry? That's what He's calling us to. That was their concept of ministry. Now again, the Greek language paints a physical picture for us, but it's really a spiritual dynamic. You realize that Jesus did that in parables. He told the parable of the sower. And the important thing was not a lesson in how to sow seed. The important thing was the spiritual dynamic that He was trying to tell us. So it was a physical story to give us spiritual insight. That's exactly what's happening here. This whole business of ministry and apostleship is not about the position that you should acquire in the church. It's all about spiritual ministry that should flow within us as we stay within the boundaries of Christ Himself. Now notice that ministry and apostleship are tied together. We've talked about it. It's the ministry and apostleship, and ministry gives content to the apostleship. So the apostleship calling is really about ministry, which is waiter at the table, which is a spiritual content and dynamic. So whatever role God has called you to play within the church or within the realm of ministry, it is to have the content of waiter at the table. And the waiter at the table has nothing on his tray except that what has been put there, and he simply presents what has been put on his tray. The waiter at the table simply delivers the goods that he's been giving. You are not the resource. Your talent is not the deal. We are not to call attention to yourself. This is not about how well people like you. This is not about whether they liked your sermon or whether they didn't. This is not about what peer pressure says. This is about the actions of a dynamic God upon the stage of your life. You are the tray. Would you simply get in your place and be the tray through which God could spill His resource? Don't go beyond. Don't go beyond that which God wants to minister in and through you. That's what He's calling us to. Now, obviously, we're going to develop skills, and it's okay to develop skills and mannerisms and ways of communicating to our generation. We want to do that. We go to school. We're not against that. Education, we're for that. Hey, develop your skills. Get all you can, but don't ever rely on them. Don't ever minister out of them. Only minister out of the dynamic of that which God has given to you. One pastor said to me, he admitted that, hey, what happens is sometimes I just don't feel like preaching. Sometimes I get up on Sunday morning and I just don't feel like it. So I have music ability, and I simply get my crowd beginning to sing, and I play the instrument a little bit, and by the time I get done, hey, there's a movement going on, and they're at the altar, and I don't have to preach. That's manipulation, man. In the Bible terms, God calls that sin. You've gone beyond the resource that God has given you. You've gone beyond what He wants to do. You've gone beyond what He desires for thee. You've copped out. You've manipulated and massaged the crowd and emotionally stirred them, but no ministry's taken place. And people may go away and say, oh, had a great service, didn't have any preaching. And all the time, all you did was manipulate the crowd. And God was never allowed to take His resource of truth and literally cut us to the bone and do within our lives what He desired to do. So we ministered beyond. The Bible calls that sin. I don't want to ever do that. I want to live within the boundaries of the person of Jesus and let Him minister through me His will and His way. He is my resource. It's interesting that young people come to us, and especially young people that have graduated from high school, they're interested in the three C's: college, companion, and career. Those three things really bother them. Who am I going to marry? Where am I going to go to college? And what's going to be my career for life? Major decisions are being made. So they're seeking the will of God. So in almost any discussion group that you want to have among that age bracket, they'll bring up these subjects and want to discuss, oh, can we find the will of God? What is the will of God? How do I discover the will of God? I wish that we could come to the place where we would be able to say to them, would you forget that? That's not the focus. I want to bring you to the real issue. And what is the real issue? Not who you're going to marry, not the career you're going to have, not where you're going to go to college. That'll all work out. That's no big deal. The real big deal is, would you get into Jesus? Would you learn His mind? Would you get a hold of His wisdom? Would you allow Him to spill through you? Would you totally die to yourself and do nothing but focus on Him and become a waiter at the table, a tray on which He could demonstrate His greatness to your world? Would you do that? Would you call that young person back to that? That's what they ought to be going after. Not focusing on career, companion, and not focusing on college. Yes, they're going to have to do those things, and that's fine. But hey, the real focus should be on Him, and in Him, those things would take care of themselves. So we need to bring them back to Him and Him alone. See, it's amazing how we want to use God as a crystal ball. Yeah, to gaze into the crystal ball and find out what the right thing is. I know God is smart. He knows the future. Man, don't pray with, don't buy a car without praying. Hey, don't buy a new car without praying. You'll get a lemon for sure. God has to show me what car will last the longest, what wife won't get sick, who should I marry who will really be able to help, and we use God as a crystal ball to get us and to benefit us, when all the time the issue should be Him, and not going beyond Him, but living in the resources of His being, and being the waiter at the table, that he could demonstrate Himself through me. That, oh God, give me your resource. Oh God, give me your mind. Oh God, flow your life through me. That is the issue, coming back to Him. Oh, in ministry, could we come back to Him and more of Him until there's nothing but Him? That's what He's calling us to. We see that in this passage. I want you to see that in your own life. I want you to experience that in your own living. Now, in this passage, there's something that takes place that I want to try to explain to you. Something happened inside of Judas. And this really is important in the concept and understanding ministry in our lives. Something happened in Judas. Judas, now the concept of ministry is that God built this chair. And it's in the plan in his dreams, and it has certain lumps in it, and has certain shapes, and it fulfills the dream of God. So this is really important. This chair, this space is really important. Then God went to His workshop and built an individual by the name of Judas. He's in the shape of that chair. He's in the shape of this space. So all Judas has to do is get in the space, and hey, the ministry will be fulfilled, and everything that God wants. So stay within the boundaries of the space, the chair, what God has made you for, the resource, a waiter at the table, Him acting through you. Stay within the boundaries of that in your place. Judas didn't stay in his place. Now what happened was, he got out of shape. So he changed in shape. God had built him in this certain shape that was in the shape of the chair. But before he got done, he didn't fit the chair anymore. Before he got done, he had changed shape. Before he got done, he didn't fit the space. The space wasn't comfortable for him. He didn't really belong in that chair anymore because he wasn't in the right shape. So he had to go to his own chair, his own place. He had to go where he now fits, where he now belongs, his own. That becomes really important in the passage. So what's happened is there's been a change in shape. So it isn't just that, hey, here's the chair, Judas says I'm not staying here, I'm going off and build my own place. He did that. But it was the fact that he changed in shape, and as he changed in shape, he couldn't sit in this place anymore. It wasn't that he left this place and went someplace else. Oh, he did. But the reason he left this place is because he didn't fit in here anymore. And he had to go and find a place where he fits. And the only place he fit was hell. So here's the place where he now fits. It's his own place. Now that's given to us in the passage as you get into these words and see the picture that they're really painting for us. Let me show you. Let's go back to, there's a parallel there's two parallel statements here. When you go back to verse 25, you'll note that in their prayer they're saying to take, and we've discussed that. Now there's a parallel between that phrase, to take, and you don't see this very clear in the English, but if you could see it in the Greek language, you would see this parallel strongly. The phrase to take and the phrase that is to go, or by transgression fell, which is literally to go beyond. Those are parallel statements. Again, verse 25, he says, to take part in this ministry and apostleship from which Judas by transgression fell. So he's setting up a contrast. To take and to go. And that's the contrast. Now, let's remind you of what to take really means. It's an infinitive, obviously. We've said this before. It's an infinitive. And it has to do with, it doesn't rely on itself. That is, it needs a main verb for its strength. And so the main verb of to take, which is an infinitive, is you have chosen, which is in the active voice, which means it refers to God. So God is the one who is actively taking. And what's he going to take? There's a direct object or an accusative. It's the part, which is the ministry that he's built. So this has all been God's operation. This has all been God's movement. This has all been what God is bringing to pass. This has all been about what God wants. So the whole prayer is, oh God, we want you to take this ministry, and we want you to find the one who's in the right shape, who can fit in this ministry. And that's what they are discussing in this prayer. That's the cry of their heart. Oh God, you built this ministry. This is yours. We want you to take this ministry and reach out and take the individual who's in the right shape to fit in that ministry and put him in that place. So God, you are initiating. You are doing the action. This is your deal. We're relying on you. That's the impact of to take part in this ministry. Now, let's go to the to go, or to go beyond, or by transgression fell. The actual Greek word there is an infinitive again. That's interesting. So when you read this in verse 25, by transgression fell, it's really the Greek word in the infinitive, to go beyond, or to go. It's in the passive voice. That surprised me. Now, the passive voice over against the active voice means that the subject is not responsible for the action of the verb, but he's receiving the action of the verb. An active voice means that the subject is responsible for the action of the verb. Now, in the original statement, in the first statement, God, you have chosen to take, God is taking the initiative. God is acting. God is moving. God is doing it. But in to go, it's passive. So the subject of the verb to go is literally receiving the action of the going. That surprised me, because the subject is Judas. So that means Judas is not responsible for the going. Judas is not responsible for that. Oh, let me state that again. In verse 25, look at it. Here's what he says. From which Judas by transgression fell, that he might go to his own place. So the idea is that something is acting upon Judas. Now you know that an infinitive doesn't stand on its own. So when you come to this passage, you discover that the infinitive to go is really under the control of by transgression fell. And probably I've confused you on this, so let me try to make it plainer. When you come to this passage, you find that the words translated by transgression fell literally means to go beyond. So he literally states this twice, which is really significant. Look at verse 25 again. He says to take part in this ministry and apostleship, from which Judas to go beyond, that he might go to his own place. So the to go is in the infinitive mood, and it's in the passive, and it doesn't stand on its own, but it stands on the idea of that Judas by transgression fell, and Judas is the subject. So Judas by transgression fell to go. So the reason he went is because he was under the action of that he went beyond. Now, the impact of the statement is simply this, that Judas is here, he's in the shape of this chair, God has brought him to the place where he's to sit in this chair. God made the chair, God acted upon this, God made Judas in the shape of the chair. But Judas now no longer fits in the chair. So he's going to go to a place where he fits. Why is he going to the place? He's not responsible for going to this other place. It's not really his fault. It's the fault of he's now out of shape. He's no longer in the shape. Well, how did he get out of shape? Well, he went beyond Jesus. See, when he went beyond Jesus, he got all out of shape. And when he got out of shape, he didn't fit in the chair. Therefore, he had to go to his own place. So the emphasis is not on he went to his own place. The emphasis is on he went beyond. And he is responsible for going beyond. And when he went beyond, he had to go to his own place. So the whole thing revolves around the fact that Judas is out of shape, and being out of shape forced him to go to his own place. See, the issue is not, here's the chair, God made you, and you're to sit in the chair. But you won't sit in the chair. No, that's not the issue. The issue is, you go beyond Jesus. You operate out of your own resource. You minister out of your own being. You go beyond Jesus. You go beyond the resource He's given you. Therefore, you get out of shape. And when you get out of shape, you're no longer able to sit in the chair, and you have to go to your own place. See, the issue is staying within the boundaries of the person of Christ. And because he was spiritually out of shape, he could no longer sit in the chair that God had for him. And he didn't have any choice but to go to the chair that he now fits, which was, of course, was hell. So this is not a choice of, am I going to minister out of God, or am I going to minister out of myself? I think I'll flip back and forth. That's impossible. When you begin to minister out of yourself, you begin to change shape, and you can no longer be a waiter at the table that He demonstrates Himself off of, because you can't sit in this chair. And you violate the whole business of ministry that God has called you to. Do you see that? That is absolutely significant and important in the passage. What a concept of ministry that gives to us. Now that brings us to some definite conclusion. One conclusion then you come to is the fact that your spiritual shape determines your ministry. Hey, if you are not in intimacy with Jesus, if you are not living within the realm of His resource, if He is not supplying you, if He is not generating you, if He is not enlivening and quickening you, then hey, there is no ministry. See, there is no ministry outside of the movement of the Spirit of God. Now, again, you can build churches, you can get people in the building, you can get bodies in a building, and if that's what you call ministry, hey, do whatever you want to do and get the bodies in there. And you can count them and brag about how big your church is. But that's not ministry. Kingdom ministry is different than that. Kingdom ministry has to do about being in the proper shape. I'm talking about the shape that God has made you, the shape that fits the chair. And the only way is to stay within the boundaries of His resource. And the minute you step out of the boundaries of His resource, you violate the shape that God has put you in, and you become another shape. And when you are in this other shape, you don't fit the chair of ministry, and you have to go to your own place, which is the place of hell. So this is absolutely essential and vital to proper ministry. If there's going to be any ministry of value spilling out of you, any ministry that's it's going to have to go beyond your ability and your means and what you can concoct. Ministry is never upon the platform of your own wisdom. It's always on the platform of His dynamic being. Will you get in your place and stay within the boundaries of His resource so that He can flow His ministry to your world? That's the issue that they are bringing up in the passage. Now, ministerial training, again, we're not against that. But when we focus on our own skills, when we focus on our own ability, and when I say focus, I'm talking about when we operate out of them. Hey, we learn how to minister to crowds. We learn how to tell the story, say the right thing, cry at the right time, do the right thing, pull the right string, get the results we want. We manipulate. Hey, and the minute we do that, we're operating beyond the resource, beyond the boundaries of Christ. We're into ourselves. And the minute we're into ourselves, ministry shuts down and no ministry takes place. Ministry only happens within the boundaries of the resource of Christ Himself. So our focus is on Him and Him alone. See, when we focus on skills, when we focus on our doing, jealousy appears. When we focus, we end up in doing. That's why we constantly talk to you through the Scriptures about doing versus being. Because the minute we get into doing, performance, then we're into, oh, you perform better than I do. Oh, they applauded louder than you were there than when I was there. Oh, the crowds were bigger when you preached than when I preached. Oh, they like your preaching better than mine. But see, in this other realm, the real biblical realm of ministry, that doesn't even appear. That's not even there. There is no jealousy. There is no envy. Why? Because this is not about you compared to me. This is about the boundaries of ministry and living in the flow of the Spirit. And this is about what the Spirit wants to do through me. This is about He has shaped the chair. He built the chair. And He shaped me in the form of that chair. And I'm going to stay within the boundaries, the shape of the chair, that He might do something through me that would be magnificent for His own dream. So one conclusion is your spiritual shape determines ministry. A second conclusion is that ministry is absolutely inevitable when you are in the right spiritual shape. In other words, there is no possibility of not ministering when you are in the chair and you are in the proper shape. And you can only be in the chair when you're in the proper spiritual shape. So it's only when you're operating within the boundaries of the Christ that ministry can take place. And when you're within the boundaries of the person of Christ and His resource, there's no way ministry cannot take place. You know that Jesus told the parable of the vine and the branch. I am the vine, you are the branch. And what was that all about? It was all about the fullness of the Spirit. It was all about God filling you with Himself and spilling His life through you. And there is no way the vine, no way the branch can be attached to the vine without bearing fruit. I mean, it is inevitable. It's just the way it is. It isn't, you got a choice, do you want fruit or not? No, ministry fruit is going to, there's no way out of ministry if you're in the vine. There's no way out of ministry if you're within the boundaries of the resource. Now, ministry in what measure? Are you talking, oh, church is going to grow? Are you talking, oh, you're going to be on television? Oh, no, we're not talking any of that. We're talking about Christ moving through you. We're talking about your world being affected. We're talking about your ministry, your home, your calling being the flow of the life of God. If God has called you to be an apostle, if He's called you to be a pastor, if He's called you to be a mom, if He's called you to be a dad, if He's called you to be an electrician, if He's called you to whatever He's called you to, it's in that realm, the ministry. That is, hey, the chair, get in the chair and be a waiter at the table, that God may dynamically demonstrate Himself through you and effectively minister. And if you are a waiter at the table within the resource of Christ and displayed on your tray, there is no way ministry cannot take place. It is inevitable. You are ministry. Don't measure success, not results. Hey, it's not about do or jealousy or envy. It's about the demonstration of the person of Jesus. Would you go after Him? Would you stay within the realm? Would you stay within the boundaries of His person? Would you get intimate with Him? Would you live in His flow? Would you let Him dynamically live within you? Would you simply get in your place and be in the shape of the chair that He made you for? Would you simply allow Him to shape you, reshape you again so you can fit in the chair, so He can dynamically flow through you to have biblical ministry?